The other thing is that Kremlin strategy started to think that maybe there is a psychopath in the White House, and God knows what he can do. He has another 3 years in office. He has no breaks, and apparently nobody can stop him. So, kind of scenarios which looked like ludicrous that America might attack Russia now perhaps do not seem as far-fetched as they used to be. So that is a kind of great worry, but frankly speaking, not just for Russia, but for many other capitals in the world.
Indeed. Uncertain times for sure. Dr. Anna Mativa, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We're going to finish with a look at the weather.
I hope we haven't forgotten anything.
Travel insurance, I tick that box.
Yeah, but remember what you forgot last year.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News Weather.
The chilly weather will stay with us for the next few days, but conditions look like becoming more settled in the middle of the week, with temperatures trending upwards. Overnight rain will clear East Anglia and the southeast early in the day for much of the country. It'll be a chilly start with a fairly widespread frost and the risk of some ice in the north. There'll be more in the way of cloud for northern and western Scotland, along with Western Ireland, with blustery showers, which will continue to give some sleet and snow over the higher ground. There'll be some good sunny spells, though, in the morning. Temperatures a degree or so higher than yesterday.
All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News Weather.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to.
Being a Sky News presenter.
Hello and welcome. Westminster, the heart of British politics. I'm so sorry about what happened to you. So what on earth is going on?
It's not true.
Can I tell you what I think? It's really unusual. Mornings with Richard and Frost. Let's crack on. Let's get started.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist.
A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan has the right to respond.
You're like, what?
A historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
Tonight on The Wrap, Donald Trump sends the Marines to the Middle East. US officials say an expeditionary unit made up of 2,500 Marines and 2,500 sailors is on its way to the region. It's a major deployment, a significant increase on the US forces already in the Middle East, giving commanders new options as the conflict rages on. News of the deployment comes after some of Iran's leaders defied airstrikes to join protesters in Tehran. No sign of the new supreme leader, though. The US Secretary of Defense claiming he's injured, even disfigured. Here, urgent talks between the government and petrol retailers, with tensions high as ministers are accused of using inflammatory language, leading to abuse of staff at the pumps. Plus, the first known picture of Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, Jeffrey Epstein and Peter Mandelson is revealed as the advisor on ministerial standards rejects calls for an investigation into the Prime Minister. And the fallout from the war in the Middle East reaches Formula One, with next month's races in Bahrain and Saudi Arabia set to be cancelled. We'll discuss the day's biggest stories with the Sunday Times chief foreign correspondent Christina Lamb and political commentator Benedict Spence. Plus, a first look at the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers, including calls in the Daily Express for Britain's biggest oil field to be opened up to stop energy bills soaring. Good evening, Christina and Benedict. Welcome to you both. Now, the United States is sending 5,000 Marines and sailors to the Middle East. It's a significant scaling up of its deployment to the region, almost 2 weeks on from the start of the war with Iran. The units are trained in crisis response handling, evacuations and protecting embassies. But, and crucially, they're also the first ones in the event of a ground war. As the US steps up its combat operations, today some of Iran's senior leadership took to the streets, joining protesters in Tehran in a show of defiance, just hours after Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth accused them of cowering and hiding underground. Let's bring in our US correspondent now, David Blevins. And David Blevins, seemingly no sign of them cowering and hiding like rats, as the Secretary of State for War said earlier today.
Well, to say we are receiving differing versions of events would be an understatement, Gillian. The self-styled Secretary of War claiming the new Supreme Leader has been wounded and the regime cowering underground, while the Iranian president is greeting people on the streets of Tehran, and a member of the National Security Council there making defiant speeches about President Trump having underestimated the extent of their resolve. Pete Hegseth also said they had decimated, that's the term he used, Iran's navy and air force and missiles capability, but added that this would be the heaviest day of firing yet. And on that disruption in the Strait of Hormuz, he said they have a range of options. There is nothing to worry about, quote unquote, but added the only thing prohibiting vessels moving through the strait is Iran firing on ships. So if those ships are under that kind of threat from Iran still, there is most definitely something still to worry about.
And David, how significant is this announcement of the 5,000 extra troops that the US is sending?
It is a significant deployment, 2,500 sailors from an amphibious ready group. They come from 3 ships, the Tripoli, the San Diego, the New Orleans, and are currently sailing towards the Middle East from the Philippines, and 2,500 Marines from a Marine Expeditionary Unit. Now, that's interesting. Members of those units often operate like an advance party of sorts. They are first on the ground preparing for operations to follow. Now, for obvious security reasons, the Pentagon doesn't want to go into detail on this, but we are being steered away from any suggestion that it's an escalation, simply the response to an earlier request to give the president maximum options. And it sounds like one of those options right now is boots on the ground. That is not a prospect Donald Trump's own support base will want to consider. He was the man who told them he would not engage in any more foreign wars, and they will certainly not want to consider it on the day. today when Central Command has confirmed the deaths of 6 crew members on board that refuelling jet that went down over western Iraq yesterday, bringing now to 13 the number of US personnel lost in the last 2 weeks.
OK, David, thank you very much for the moment. Christina, is this an escalation, this extra 5,000 troops being deployed?
I mean, 5,000 troops isn't going to make a lot of difference if in a country of 90 million people where you've got the regime forces themselves make up 1 million. So if you were looking at putting in ground troops, you'd need a lot more than 5,000. Could be that there's some kind of specific operation that they might be thinking about, but it may just be that they want, as they said, to have more options. I mean, certainly the fact remains that we've never seen regime change from the skies, as has been said. And so, you know, if you really are intent on removing this regime, then you are going to need something a bit more than all these massive airstrikes that we've seen. I think they state that they've hit 15,000 targets, so that, you know, this has been a lot. But this whole idea that they have kept repeating, that the idea is that at some point the people of Iran should then come out into the streets, seems to me just so difficult to imagine, given that not long ago in January, we saw the most horrendous massacre of people that had bravely come out into the streets. So, you know, people know what this regime will do. And it's also a wounded regime now, so it could be much more vindictive. And there's been endless warnings. I've been the last couple of weeks since this started trying to talk to people inside Iran, which is difficult because of the internet shutdown. But one of the things they've been saying is that there have been much more warnings this week to people not to come out, and very heavy presence on the streets of besieged militia regime forces.
Benedict, Donald Trump has said that, you know, he's prepared to, from the beginning, I think, that they're prepared to send as many troops as necessary. So this might not necessarily be seen as an escalation. But he's also said today that, you know, the war will end when he feels it in his bones.
Yeah, famously, that's exactly when wars end, when you decide. You know, everybody famously throughout history, they've just decided at the drop of the hat. What Christina says is, of course, right, you can't just end this conflict either with 5,000 troops on the ground, but we don't know exactly what they're going to be doing. For obvious reasons, operational reasons, they're not going to share that with us. But, you know, it's, I suppose, the question, if this is about keeping the Strait of Hormuz open, are these people going to be deployed for, you know, targeting drone manufacturing facilities? Is it going to be that they're dropped into the centre of Tehran to sort of wreak havoc? Nobody's quite sure. What I would say is, if nothing else, Christina is, of course, right. You don't get regime change by just bombing and hoping for the best. There was always going to have to be some sort of ground movement. Whether or not that was going to be predominantly the United States or other nations or a coalition, there was going to have to be a bit of goodwill on the behalf of the United States, and that was probably going to mean that they were going to have to put troops in first. A lot of this was happening because, supposedly, you know, Israel was leaning on this, but Israel is not going to put troops into that situation, again, for very obvious reasons. So we've been discussing, you know, there have been rumours about maybe the Kurds, maybe Azerbaijan might be sort of inclined at some point to come in. Nobody knows at this moment whether that's on the cards. But neither of those two groups, especially not the Kurds, given what's gone on in the past, would be at all inclined to do that unless there were already American troops on the ground first. And on top of that, if Donald Trump is saying everything's open, everything's on the table, well, he's going to have to slowly, therefore, start the process of deploying people. You can't just sort of deploy 100,000 troops overnight and just go, wow, how about that? He's going to have to get the public back at home and the US military back at home and around the world ready for this. And so it is going to happen incrementally. And then there's the third thing, which is the United States Gulf allies. Many of them are very, very apprehensive about what's been going on. A lot of wavering politically. Again, that bit of goodwill needs to be shown. American troops at the forefront of all of this, rather than just the Gulf states bearing the brunt.
Christina, we're just seeing pictures of Donald Trump going about his presidential business today, where I think he dobbed a Stetson for a little bit of that. Yes, he does. As if there wasn't a war raging in the Middle East. But he has said today, mentioned Russia has come into the frame, which is an interesting one, I think, and he's admitted for the first time that Putin might be helping Iran.
Yeah, but at the same time, of course, they're also easing sanctions on Russian oil imports, which is very alarming for Zelensky, because this means that Russia can have a lot more revenue available, which enables them to carry on attacking Ukraine. So he's obviously very disturbed by this. Other European leaders also have voiced their concern. Trump has said that this is a limited easing of sanctions. It's for a month, but, you know, when it comes towards the end of that month, if the oil prices is still high, and there's no reason at the moment to see that that would change, he may decide to continue. And so this means Putin, you know, at the moment, as I think the EU president of the Commission said the other day, Antonio Costa, that Russia at the moment is the real winner of this. And so, you know, I think Iran's strategy of closing off the Straits of Hormuz, which apparently, if you believe what they're saying, the US had not thought would happen, or the Trump administration had not thought would happen, which is quite astonishing because it seems to be the obvious thing to do.
Well, it was thought that that would be the catastrophic point at which the Strait of Hormuz would close. That's the end game, but it's already at the end game, so we're at catastrophe.
I mean, Iran is showing that, you know, geography is more important than technology, and that they control the northern shore of the Gulf. They're able to close it off. 20% of the world's oil, $20 million a day, pass along that strait, and at the moment, not even 1 million barrels are getting
No,
through,
international
so
significance is huge.
Yeah.
Well, tensions were very high in Downing Street this afternoon as the Chancellor met petrol retailers to discuss ways to keep prices fair at the pumps amid the surging cost of oil. The meeting almost didn't happen after ministers were accused of using inflammatory language, leading to the abuse of workers on forecourts. The mood was more collegiate once the meeting did get underway.
We wanted to speak to retailers because I do want us to work together to keep supply stable, to reassure the public and make sure that price rises are limited to what is absolutely necessary and no more. That's why we have frozen fuel duty for another year. It's why we've extended the 5p per litre cut through to September. And those are real and direct savings for motorists, and we want those to be felt.
Very good meeting, constructive. As I mentioned, we're anxious to work with the government. We talked about the Fuel Finder scheme and the implementation. We're nearly there. We're up to over 90 sites, 90% of all sites on it. And we talked about, obviously, trying to do the best by the consumer in a time of uncertainty.
Did they apologise for the language that they used towards you earlier?
They didn't apologise, but I reiterated that we need to be careful what we say in the media. Obviously, anything that times of uncertainty does impact forecourt staff, and they're doing their best to serve the customers.
Well, as we've been discussing, the spike in oil prices is being felt around the world, and it's led to drastic action, with the US lifting some sanctions on Russian oil. The loosening of those measures imposed because of the Ukraine war means Moscow will now be able to sell its oil that's currently stranded at sea. Our business and economics correspondent Paul Kelso has been looking at how President Putin is benefiting from the conflict in the Middle East.
We don't know how long the US-Israeli war on Iran will last, but it's already delivered a clear winner: Russia. The price of its oil has spiked, and now the US has lifted sanctions for Russian oil already at sea on oil tankers like this. This is the Vostochny Prospect as it was passing Dover on Wednesday. It's still sanctioned by the UK, but it's now free to sell its oil to many more customers. America's aim is to bring the oil price down, but the immediate consequence is a windfall for Moscow. We can look at an oil chart to show us the path over the last 6 months. Blue is Brent crude, the global benchmark. Red is Urals, that's Russian oil. You can see, because of sanctions, Urals is traded at a discount to Brent crude. And in fact, that gap was widening as the US pressured India to stop buying Russian oil. But since the attack on Iran, look, both prices spike, but the discount is entirely erased. And all of a sudden, Russian oil, which is plentiful and unrestrained by the Strait of Hormuz, it's not just in demand, it's now available, and that is good for Kremlin revenues, which ultimately fund the war. This chart shows us the value of those crude exports going back to the invasion of Ukraine. You can see sanctions took a long time to bite. Revenues did not fall fast, but the last year they have been down 18%. But look at the last couple of weeks. There's a hockey stick. That's been reversed. Revenues are up 17%. Analysts, Sarah, estimate Russian revenues at 250 million euros a day from crude exports alone. Now, the pause in US sanctions means that Russian oil already at sea can now be sold. Last month, we went to the channels to look at exactly that, to look at the shadow fleet passing the UK. And tankers like this, the Kusai, loaded with 750,000 barrels of crude that has soared in value while it's been at sea. When the Kusai was loaded at Ust-Luga, a Russian Baltic port, on February the 2nd, the Ural's price was $53 a barrel. That made the cargo worth around $40 million. It took 8 days for it to pass through the Baltic and come round to Dover, where we caught up with it. The price had changed a little, up slightly, but it's still $42 million. When the Kusai sails on, it navigates through the Mediterranean. It transits the Suez Canal. By this time, the attacks on Iran have begun. And as it's passing Sri Lanka, this is March the 9th by this point, it's $100 a barrel for Urals, $75 million on board. Now, in the last few days, it's made its way towards Paradeep in India. On Thursday morning, Urals, the value was still $65 million, 60% more than when it left Russia. And the Kusai's destination in India there is instructive because it tells us who's been buying the oil. The answer is India, the orange area here, and China. In red, the biggest customers. We can see, actually, that the US pressure on India was squeezing supply, and that was narrowing. But those sanctions have been lifted, and it's on its way up again. China, meanwhile, is using Russia to fill the hole left by its Middle East suppliers. Around half of its imports come from the Gulf. That oil can't get through the Strait of Hormuz, so Russia is filling the gap. And all of this is good news for Moscow. Its shadow fleet at sea, much of it waiting for customers out on the oceans. Well, it can now go and sell that oil. And Vladimir Putin, having been under genuine, growing economic pressure, now finds himself able to profit from a crisis of America's making.
Well, in the past 2 weeks, you've heard plenty of reports and analysis about the Strait of Hormuz, but the White House is facing growing pressure to explain its own analysis of the Strait before the war, amid claims officials underestimated Iran's ability to disrupt global oil traffic. Benedict, do you think that is the case, that they simply underestimated Iran's power in terms of controlling the Strait of Hormuz?
I mean, if it is, I have no idea how that's happened because, you know, let's be clear, not just the United States, the Israelis have been preparing for a conflict with Iran for decades now. It's not as if the prospect wasn't on the agenda. And the developments that Iran has taken over the last couple of years in terms of its drones and its longer-range missiles, you know, this has not gone unnoticed, you know, partly because half of the stuff has been used by Russia against Ukraine. So if there was genuinely a sense that they wouldn't attempt to disrupt the Strait, let alone close it, well, I think that's incredibly naive, up to the point that I almost don't believe it. I sort of, you know, think that maybe this was priced in, and it's possibly even that the United States is briefing this to say, well, look how reckless these people are being. We need to be clear, though, this isn't actually the worst thing that the Iranians could do. Closing the Strait is not the same as actually striking all of the oil infrastructure, because right now they could open the Strait again tomorrow and it would, obviously, there'd be supply chain issues, but within a couple of weeks that oil would be flowing fairly and freely again. But if you've got all of the tankers sort of clustered around in ports, well, those are giant sitting targets. And if the Iranians were to escalate this, they could take those out. Well, then you're talking about up to a third of the capacity of the world to ship oil being out of action until you can, what, build more tankers? That takes time. If you then hit the refineries themselves, all of them, then that takes things offline for another 6 months or so. When the Iraqis set fire to the oil and gas fields in Kuwait, it took almost a year to put them out. Well, if the Iranians start doing that to Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Kuwait, Qatar, Bahrain, how long does that take? And it's not just the economic and practical sides of this, the ecological damage that that does is catastrophic. So let's not pretend that actually this is the worst case scenario. They can escalate this. They've just decided to go a lot harder first than the United States said that they would.
Well, Pete Hegseth has attracted some ridicule today for suggesting that the Straits of Hormuz are basically open, apart from one small problem. Should we take a listen to what he said?
The only thing prohibiting transit in the Straits right now is Iran shooting at shipping. It is open for transit should Iran not do that.
Is that misinformation, do you believe, Christina?
Yeah, look, I think quite a lot of what Pete Higgs has said needs to be taken with a pinch of salt. But, I mean, it does seem clear that the planning for this war in Iran seems to have been not as extensive as perhaps you would have hoped for getting involved in something that has such devastating consequences, not just for the people in Iran, but the whole region. The only thing I would say about the Straits of Hormuz, so I was in Israel last year during the 12-day war with Iran, and of course, at that point, Iran didn't do this. So whether that made them think, well, that wasn't going to be their priority, that they would do the same thing of firing lots of missiles and drones at Israel. Actually, this time round, there hasn't been so much at Israel. It's been more targeting economic targets in...
Well, the fight back is wider, isn't it,
yeah,
this time round, and it's on an international basis.
Last time it would, apart from one attack on Doha, the rest of it was all Israel.
So, from that sense, this is definitely an escalation, isn't it? When you've got them attacking their neighbours,
yeah,
previously which they've had no quarrels with.
No, clearly it seems that they thought by doing this it would get the Gulf countries to pressure the United States to end this because they're not used to being attacked. They market themselves, particularly Dubai, Abu Dhabi, as being safe destinations, and so that they wouldn't want anything like this. But it might have the opposite effect, that it's actually really angering these Gulf countries, particularly ones that had closer relations with Iran, like Qatar. So, you know, it's interesting. I can see, you know, if you're in Iran's shoes and there's no way that you can compete militarily with the firepower of the United States and Israel combined, you know, what they're doing makes a lot of sense.
There's a lot of Western money tied up in Dubai, and there have been great efforts to try and turn it into a global financial centre. So I do think a lot of this is also with that in mind, to try to make it unviable as a global financial centre.
And the financial centre itself has been attacked, hasn't it?
Of course, and I think that this is also a demonstration, though, of Iran taking a sort of a wrecking ball approach to this. But I think also, more broadly, looking at the Gulf Cooperation Council states, a lot of them would have been expected to pick up the tab, for instance, in places like Gaza and possibly in the aftermath of what's been going on in Syria over the last couple of years. And there have been sort of quite significant attempts by the Gulf countries, by the UAE, Saudi Arabia, to try to flex their economic muscle as a sort of an alternative sphere to Iran, which has tried to do a lot to sort of influence politics militarily. Well, if you're going to try to hamstring those countries, your biggest rivals, who are trying to do things a very different way, by ensuring that actually their financial resources are severely threatened because of this oil and gas crisis, and they're having to divert funds towards propping themselves up, and their own population's very upset, then that's going to be quite an effective way of curbing perhaps those countries' support. There's another aspect to this as well, which is, of course, it's not just energy. Downstream of energy is food, fertilizer. Those prices are going to go up. A lot of countries in this part of the world are tremendously food insecure. Again, these are the countries we'd be talking about, would be the ones to prop up places like Egypt, for instance, or Iraq. If it has a knock-on effect and those countries can't afford to feed their populations, you're talking tens of millions of people sort of living on the breadline there that might start to make the migratory move north, perhaps towards Europe or perhaps into other parts of the Middle East. It creates the possibility of more instability elsewhere, and all of those countries that are secure or thought they were secure will be incredibly anxious about that possibility.
This is the mayhem and chaos that Iran promised if they were going to launch start a regional war. It affects not just the region, but the rest of the world as well. Well, away from the Iran war, the Prime Minister's standards watchdog has rejected calls for an investigation into Sir Keir Starmer and his handling of the appointment of Peter Mandelson as ambassador to the United States. The Conservatives had accused the PM of making misleading statements in the Commons and said Number 10 was withholding documents that should have been released, a claim the party has repeated tonight. More on that in a moment. But first, here's Laura Bundock taking us through what we've learned about the latest revelation in the Epstein files.
The first known picture of Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, Jeffrey Epstein and Peter Mandelson has emerged. 3 powerful men sat together in a relaxed setting. It is another interesting and intriguing revelation from the Epstein files. So what more have we learnt from this photo? In the picture, taken outside, you can see the 3 men sat around a table with star-spangled mugs in front of them. Both Andrew and Peter Mandelson are barefoot, wearing white robes, and there's an empty space at the table. Sky News has not verified the location, although the architecture of the property strongly resembles homes in Martha's Vineyard, a well-known Massachusetts summer hangout for the wealthy. We don't know when the photo was taken, what the occasion was, or indeed who took it. And this photo is not evidence of any wrongdoing. Sky News understands it was taken in the same location as an image that previously surfaced in Epstein's so-called birthday book. In that photo, Lord Mandelson is again shown in a white bathrobe with Epstein. Above the photo was a message in which he describes Epstein as his best pal. Both Andrew and Lord Mandelson, the UK's former ambassador to the US, strongly deny any wrongdoing relating to their relationship with Jeffrey Epstein.
Well, as you can see, our political correspondent Rob Powell has joined us. Rob, I mean, we've been asked this question time and time again, but I mean, this is just more pressure on the Prime Minister.
Yeah, although this evening, some good news, maybe a small bit of good news for the Prime Minister. Basically, the Conservatives were trying to, in a bid to kind of keep this going, a classic way of keeping this going in Westminster is to write to the ethics advisor, basically the Prime Minister's standards advisor. And sort of his office is where ministerial careers tend to go to die a little bit, because he's judge, jury and executioner when it comes to the ministerial code. So what the Tories had basically alleged was that essentially the Prime Minister had misled the House of Commons, is what they said, because he said that if he knew what he knows now about Peter Mandelson, he wouldn't have ever appointed him. And what the Conservatives were trying to say is, whoa, 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 the due diligence report shows that actually back then you knew a lot about this. So they were saying that that was misleading, and they were also trying to say that the process wasn't followed properly, so that was misleading as well. This evening, the Independent Ethics Advisor has written back to the Conservatives, saying he doesn't think there's a case to answer. Essentially, that the Bloomberg emails, those emails that had Peter Mandelson saying about Jeffrey Epstein, you know, fight for your early release, my best pal, that materially changed things. And that was what the Prime Minister was referring to when he said that new information came to light. And he also talked about how political direct appointments are made and said, look, the process was followed because, bluntly, when it comes to direct political appointments, there ain't much of a process. It's basically that the government, the Prime Minister, decides who they want and then they get them. So a small bit of good news, I guess, for the Prime Minister, that he's basically been given a clean bill of health from the standards advisor. But obviously it's not the end of it. There's a whole load more files that will come out eventually.
But the Conservatives are still insisting tonight that potentially documents have been withheld by Number 10?
Yeah, the other part of what they wrote to the standards advisor about was saying they are trying to hold back documents and therefore you should look into this. Standards advisor has said that's not really my remit, that's one for Parliament. They are saying things like one of the notes that doesn't have any of the annotations from the Prime Minister on it. They're saying, where's that? Has that been redacted? Has that been held back? Peter Mandelson's conflict of interest form. They're saying that that's the blank version has been given as part of the publication. We haven't got actually what Peter Mandelson put in there. Now, the reply from government is a lot of that has been withheld because of the Metropolitan Police inquiry. Other bits as well have gone through the Intelligence and Security Committee to basically make sure there's no national security issues. So there's lots more to come, but I think really this is an exercise on the Conservative part of trying to keep this going, basically. And, you know, the standards advisor is a classic Westminster way of trying to keep this going, but they seem to have reached a dead end on this one because he's come down on the side of the PM.
Ben, do you think there's more mileage in the claim by the Conservatives that documents have been withheld?
I do think that there is a bit more mileage in it, but it almost doesn't matter. Almost none of this actually matters, because actually what matters is that there's a photograph of Peter Mandelson with Andrew Mountbatten Windsor and Jeffrey Epstein on the front page of national newspapers. That's what people are going to be paying attention to. They're not going to be looking at the minutiae of details around standards or ethics or anything like that. Maybe that will be relevant down the line, but that's actually what matters, and that's just another reappraisal of the fact that the Prime Minister appointed this man, our guy in Washington, despite what was known, and the levels to which what was known is slightly irrelevant. Everybody, I think, who pays any attention to this story understands that the Prime Minister took a calculated risk and that the risk has backfired. It's a really slow-acting poison because this story is going to keep rolling, it's going to keep on coming up, more information is going to come out. So, as I think I've said this before, it almost doesn't matter if nothing comes of this. It's going to keep chipping away at his credibility in the eyes of the public, and eventually that will translate into the backbenches as well. It's just a matter of time and how frequently it comes up. He can't have a war breaking out in the Middle East every week to distract the public from this.
Christina, do you think the fact that the Prime Minister has come forward and said, hands up, it was my mistake, it was, the buck stops here, I took the decision and it's my fault, has that helped him?
I don't think so, because of his own background, the fact that he was chief prosecutor, that he is an international lawyer, that, of all people, you would have expected him to have asked those questions. So I think that makes people very surprised at this. And it wasn't as if Mandelson didn't have history before. So.
Yeah. I mean, his defence was that he lied to him, basically.
Yeah, but we still don't know. What wasn't in that bundle of documents earlier this week is the famous 3 questions that Morgan McSweeney basically asked Peter Mandelson after this due diligence report had come through that had... that it did have a fair amount in there saying he maintained a close relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, that he was friends with him after he was convicted initially. So there was a lot in there. 3 questions were asked, the answers came back. The Prime Minister says those answers were misleading, and basically that's where the sort of miscalculation almost came from, if you like. Again, I kind of agree with Benedict in that it doesn't change the fundamental kind of contours of why this story is damaging for the Prime Minister. And it does go back to what you were saying about his background. It's a guy that kind of came into office promising high standards, saying that I'm the guy that kind of gets to the bottom of things and roots out dirt and trash. And he seems to have not really got to the bottom of this one adequately. And as a result, you've got a whole load of scandal that he promised he wasn't going to bring back into government.
Yeah, he was given the information and acted to take the decision that he did regardless. So now we have the repercussions of that. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll take a first look at what's making the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers. Do stay with us if you can.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist.
A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan had the right to respond.
You're like, what?
A historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
You are watching The Wrap. Time now to see what's making the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers. On the front of the eye, the US and Israel intensify strikes on Iran in the hope of a breakthrough as the conflict in the Middle East enters its third week. The Telegraph leads with the US president deploying a marine unit to the Middle East that could put boots on the ground to help secure the Strait of Hormuz. The Guardian reports that Europe is pushing back against Trump's decision to ease some US sanctions on Russian oil as prices surged due to the war. The Express headline reads, "Get drilling to stop soaring bills," as the Prime Minister is urged to open the North Sea oil field to stop energy bills going up. The Times carries a promise from the Chancellor to help households with rising energy bills during the conflict. The FT leads on a warning from Wall Street that oil prices will be driven up sharply if the war continues for months to come. The Mirror carries this new photograph of Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, Peter Mandelson and Jeffrey Epstein with the headline, "Andy, Mandy and the Paedophile." The Star leads with the same image of the three men sitting round a table in bathrobes. Starmer's dereliction of duty is the headline in the Mail after Number 10 admitted the Prime Minister did not speak to Lord Mandelson before he was appointed as US Ambassador. Well, Christina and Benedict taking us through the papers. Starting with the Eye, let's take us into this one, Benedict. The headline, Iran war spirals. They're listing all of the escalations that have been reported. US and Israeli warplanes launch new blitz on Iran. As we mentioned before, Trump saying that he knows when the war will end because he will feel it in his bones. Never mind what Iran say to that.
Shiver me timbers. We have to wait until Donald Trump gets a feeling until we can all rest easy in our beds. I mean, this certainly isn't a limited operation. The escalation is exactly the right word. Spirals is what the Eye says. And it is starting to affect all sorts of other issues. Of course, it's affecting the Formula One, amongst other things, in the Gulf. That's, and in Bahrain. That really shows you how much things are a problem if all of the events that these countries go to great lengths to put on to try to, promote themselves around the world are being shuttered. That's a demonstration right there that they are concerned. Obviously, then we have elsewhere in the region, we've got the situation in Lebanon, which threatens to spiral out of control again. That's going to be a great cause of concern for European countries in terms of migration, refugees potentially leaving, and of course the Israeli military, which doesn't want a second front being open, but almost certainly will have anticipated this. All of these other states as well in the region, be it Kuwait, be it Iraq, those on the borders that will be feeling, I think, ever more jittery about their more fundamental oil infrastructure being targeted. Everybody is very apprehensive. The next step, boots on the ground, as has been discussed now, that's not going to be solved with 5,000. It's not going to be solved with 10,000. It's going to require probably boots from several different countries coming in, and a lot of agreement from a lot of those countries, because let's be clear, this is not a grand coalition of people who see eye to eye. You've got Israel on one hand, and then you've potentially got the Kurds, you might have Azerbaijan. If either of those two countries get involved, you're going to have to talk to the Turks. Are they going to be particularly enamoured by this? They don't particularly get on with Israel either. And you've got the Gulf countries. Are they going to be taking a role in this, or are they going to be sitting idly by? It's very difficult. What I would say, in a way that, for instance, the Ukraine war is much more easy to perceive. It's very difficult to see which way this is going to escalate, and because there are so many theatres now that have opened up, it's actually rather difficult to see which one, if any, is going to take hold of the entire situation and become the focal point. Donald Trump may say he can end the war, he will know when to end the war. I do think it's getting away from the United States at the moment. It certainly feels like it is, anyway.
No, we're sending 5,000 troops to the region. It's definitely not diminishing. But do you think, Christina, that we will ever see US troops on the ground?
Well, Donald Trump's giving very mixed messages, isn't he? I mean, one day he says the war is very complete, but then he's saying it might go on for longer, that they're going to escalate I mean, the last few days, each day there's been far more strikes on Iran. So, you know, there's never been a clear plan, right, nor a clear objective. And you can't, if you don't go into a war with a clear objective, then how are you going to achieve anything?
Well, when it first started, one of the clear objectives, as I saw it, was that it was going to be about regime change, but that sort of filtered out.
Yeah, but
down the line.
He always said that it would be, he was creating a sort of generational, or once-in-a-generation opportunity for the people of Iran to come, rather less than that he was going to remove the regime. And I was always dubious about that because, you know, this regime has a lot of history of horrifically cracking down and killing large numbers of people. So to expect people to come out on the streets only 6 weeks after this massacre, where we believe at least 30,000 people were killed in just 2 days, is really asking a lot, I think. It's very unclear, really, what. I mean, even if you just...
Just to say, we're just seeing shots of Donald Trump at Joint Base Andrews there. It's this customary on a Friday.
But even if you just take, you know, the more limited objective of trying to stop the nuclear program, there is no information whatsoever that has been damaged. I mean, the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Authority, is saying that they believe the 60% enriched uranium, most of which was supposed to be near Isfahan, is buried underneath. Half of it may have been moved somewhere else, but there's no sense that that's been destroyed.
Mm-hmm. And we know domestically for President Trump, the major criticism has been the fact that really Americans don't know why they're going to war, that the objectives have been set out, but they've not been clear. There have been actually quite a lot of them.
Yeah, I mean, this was not at all what the American people voted for when they elected Donald Trump president for a second time.
They said he was going to end
Exactly,
wars.
They wanted the opposite of this.
Should we just cut into some of that film of President Trump, because he has been speaking to reporters. Let's have a listen in.
The situation in Iran is going very well. A lot of big hits today, a lot of big wins today, as you probably have heard militarily. And I think it's going very well and very good control. We'll see what's happening with the Straits. They continue to try and sabotage their own country in the Middle East, but it's been very, very strong militarily.
Mr. President, what's your message to voters who may be concerned about the potential for rising gas prices?
Well, I think the gas prices, as soon as that's over, are going to come tumbling down along with everything else. I think it's going to be, you're going to see a very big decrease in the price of gasoline, gas, anything having to do with energy, as soon as this is ended. But we had to end the nuclear threat in the Middle East and throughout the world, and we will have done that.
Mr. President,
still expect unconditional surrender, and what does that mean?
Well, to me, it means very simply that we are in a position of dominance that nobody's ever seen before. And whether or not they're able to say the words or whether or not they're able to even fight. Their Navy is gone, their Air Force is gone, most of their military is gone, their big threat is gone in every way. But they have no radar, they have no anti-aircraft weapons, for the most part weapons, and for indefinitely they have no way of determining what they call visibility. So just about everything is gone, and you'll see that. But today we've had some very, very big hits, very powerful hits.
Mr. President, when will the Navy start escorting tankers to the Straits of Hormuz?
It'll happen soon.
Mr. President.
About the Iran war?
I have, and we're discussing a couple of different things with them. Not only that, but others.
Mr. President, on the SAVE Act, if Leader Thune cannot whip up the Republican support to either nuke the filibuster, reopen the government and pass the SAVE Act, or somehow...
It's not called the SAVE Act, it's called the
Save America Act. You're right, sir. Do you think, if Leader Thune can't accomplish that, do you think the Senate needs a new leader?
Well, it's certainly a very popular thing. I don't think there's ever been a bill that's more popular than the Save America Act. It's voter ID, it's proof of citizenship, It's things that are so popular. No men and women's sports, no transgender mutilization of our children. So many different things. It's so good. No running around with the mail-in ballot nonsense that's gone on for so long that no other country does. No other country. We're going to clean up our elections. I don't think I've ever been involved in anything that's had the support of the Save America Act. So we'll see what happens.
How regularly are you speaking with Prime Minister Netanyahu? And are your objectives the same in terms of ending the war?
Well, I think they might be a little different, I guess. You know, they're a different country than we are. But he will tell you there's never been a power like the power of the United States. I built our military in my first term, continue to do so, but I built our military and rebuilt it. It was in bad shape, just like the wall, just like the border, just like everything else in our country. It was all in bad shape, but I rebuilt the military in my first term, and we're using it in this term to, you know, really for the sake of good, for the sake of peace and for the sake of safety and good.
You speak daily?
I speak to him a lot.
How long now do you think the war is likely to last?
I can't tell you that. I mean, I have my own idea, but what good does it do? It'll be as long as it's necessary. They've been decimated. Their country's in bad shape. The whole thing is collapsing. If you read some of the fake news, it's like, oh, they're doing wonderfully. They're not doing wonderfully. They're doing the opposite. They're doing as bad as you can have. I would say this. I won't give you time, but we're way ahead of schedule.
And can you comment on...
Militarily, we're way ahead of schedule. I can't talk to you.
Sir, you made a post about Claudia Sheinbaum refusing your help in Mexico. What's your plan with Mexico?
Well, she should not have refused my help. I offered to get rid of the cartels in Mexico, and for some reason she doesn't want to do that. I like her very much, but she should get rid of the cartels because the cartels are, whether we like it or not, the cartels are running Mexico. We can't have that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
OK, well, there he goes. Off he goes, as is customary on a Friday evening, but not before he told us that the situation in Iran is going very well, very, very strong militarily. Our military was in a bad shape, he said, but I've rebuilt it, and the war will go on as long as necessary. America's in a position of dominance that nobody has ever seen before. We had to end the nuclear threat. What did you make of what he had to say there, Christine?
Well, I think we're no clearer, really, as to what, you know, when he says it would go on as long as necessary, we don't know what it is they're actually trying to achieve. So that's quite difficult to estimate. And he talks about lots of big hits, big wins. It made me think of this bizarre video that the White House put out a couple of days ago, which when I first saw it, I thought must be fake, which was like a sort of Nintendo video game of them firing things off. And although then the Iranian regime also put out a strange video of like Lego figures attacking each other. So I'm not quite sure if this is sort of supposed to be appealing to Gen Z or what they think they're trying to do. But yeah, I just felt like we're really no clearer as to what it is he's trying to achieve and how long this is all going to take. And yes, I mean, he's right. In some ways, it has been militarily a great success. I mean, the very first day, killing the supreme leader, taking out the head of the IRGC and lots of senior people. I think they said 50 people in that first day. But the regime also clearly had a succession plan in place and has, you know, shown some continuity. We, of course, the new Ayatollah Mujtaba, the Ayatollah's son, people call it Nipotollah, he's yet to be seen, and so there are some doubts. Was he injured?
Some suggestion from Pete Hegseth today that, you know, he's been injured and possibly
some even think he's dead, right? And it was a sort of clever move, naming someone who's already killed because then they can't kill him, and that this is actually sort of a military running thing.
Well, yes, exactly. Then it depends who actually has control of him, whatever state he may be, and those people get to call the shots. And maybe it's an extremist version of the IRGC, or maybe it's a more practical side that actually the Trump administration feels they can do business with. I mean, the weird thing is, we are all sat here slightly none the wiser because there's an awful lot of propaganda coming out from all sides. Nobody can really be sure what's going on. A few things are clear. The US and Israel have overwhelming fire superiority. They clearly have knocked out, and have not knocked out, though, Iran's drone-making capacity or its ability to fire off its drones, and that has to be a priority. The only other thing that we can say for definite is, and this was known before the war, Israel, separate to the United States, Israel has very comprehensively infiltrated many echelons of Iran's security infrastructure. How much of that remains in place, I think, is going to be a key question. They're obviously not going to let that on, but that could be very telling as this goes on. But as it comes to Donald Trump, as much as he didn't want to get into the war, or at least he said that he wasn't going to get into the war, now that he's in it, he can't step away from it because then he's not just a warmonger, he's also a loser by his own metrics.
But he can step away. I mean, I think it is quite likely that at some point he is just going to declare that this is victory.
Well,
he's got a victory.
That's the thing. When he feels it in his bones, Christina and Benedict, thank you very much for the moment. Let's take a look at the sports news now with Teddy.
Adding a continental touch to Arsenal's never say die style is what Wenger is promising.
Quand je suis venu, je veux dire, il y a tout ce qu'il faut pour être un grand club. Je veux dire, ils ont un public qui est fabuleux. Je veux dire, il y a des terrains où on peut s'entraîner. Il y a un entourage qui est très bien. Je veux dire, ils ont des très bonnes structures.
I think it was a big chance for Arsenal to take this player because I believe he has a great future.
He knew he had to get those kind of players that will know his philosophy and will help him implement that philosophy on the pitch at Arsenal. If you want to change the mentality at Arsenal, you don't go and sign English players.
It didn't have as big an effect as when we signed Dennis Bergkamp. That was like a massive statement. When Patrick signed, these are players that nobody's really heard of.
I was happy to have the chance to sign him. And overall, Patrick Vieira landed at Arsenal, but nobody knew that I was a manager. So at the start, he didn't play.
So actually Remy Gard came in at the same time. Remy was an accomplished player, but also I think to give Patrick comfort that he wasn't alone, he wasn't the only French guy in the dressing room. And I think that worked well. Remy was a little bit more of a mature player than Patrick.
Remy was great for Patrick because Remy spoke English, Remy was so smart, loved everything about London, would go to museums, go and take Patrick along with him. And Patrick was so young, all of this was new to him.
They were not speaking well English at the start and they had to adapt. Remy Gard is a very intelligent person. Patrick Vieira will know better than I do, but it was certainly important to him.
I arrived at Arsenal before Arsene, so it was quite really challenging to understand the language and to really understand the culture. It was really good that Remy Gard was with me at the time because he was a really, really big help for me. It was challenging at the beginning.
He couldn't speak English and it was up to me and my best A-level French to make sure he settled down. After a couple of weeks, I went down to the dressing room. I said, Patrick, est-ce que tu peux dire quelque chose en anglais? Can you speak something in English? He said, oui, Monsieur Dean. Yes, Mr. Dean. I said, qu'est-ce que tu peux dire? What can you say? He looked at me and he said, Tottenham are magnifique, Patrick, fantastic, Patrick. I said, qui te dit ça? Who told you that? He said, Ray Parler. So Ray was giving him English lessons.
Ray Parler is the last who could help for the language barrier.
If Ray's got into Patrick's head to try and teach him English, he was set up by us lot, you know, because we were like, yeah, go on, Ray, tell him some stuff. I remember him talking about beans on toast, and Patrick's like, what do you mean? Beans on toast? You've hit the beans on toast. And like, the post.
I have to be honest, the English players make it really easy for me as well. They've been helping me to find a way to express.
Let's see what's happening with the weather for you now.
You're looking happy.
Well, the forecast looks good.
So you've sorted the travel insurance then?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News Weather.
Well, the chilly weather will stay with us for the next few days, but conditions look like becoming more settled in the middle of the week, with temperatures trending upwards. Overnight, rain will clear East Anglia and the southeast early in the day. For much of the country, it'll be a chilly start with a fairly widespread frost and the risk of some ice in the north. There'll be more in the way of cloud for northern and western Scotland, along with Western Ireland, with blustery showers which will continue to give some sleet and snow over the higher ground. There'll be some good sunny spells through the morning, with temperatures a degree or so higher than yesterday's values. It will feel quite pleasant in light winds.
All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News Weather.
Coming up, much more on the conflict in the Middle East as Donald Trump sends in the Marines.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist. A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan had the right to respond.
You're like, what?
A historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
They call him the king of the jungle.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Yusra al-Baghir has this report, and this is what's left of it.
As a woman of colour, how did the Harris campaign speak to you?
People risk their lives to speak to us for this report.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
Tonight on The Wrap, Donald Trump sends the Marines to the Middle East. US officials say an expeditionary unit made up of 2,500 Marines and 2,500 sailors is on its way to the region. It's a major deployment, a significant increase on the US forces already in the Middle East, giving commanders new options as the conflict rages on. News of the deployment comes after some of Iran's leaders defied airstrikes to join protesters in Tehran. No sign of the new supreme leader, though, the US Secretary of Defense claiming he's injured, even disfigured. Here, urgent talks between the government and petrol retailers, with tensions high as ministers are accused of using inflammatory language, leading to abuse of staff at the pumps. Plus, the first known picture of Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, Jeffrey Epstein and Peter Mandelson is revealed, as the advisor on ministerial standards rejects calls for an investigation into the Prime Minister. And the fallout from the war in the Middle East reaches Formula One, with next month's races in Bahrain and Saudi Arabia set to be cancelled. We'll discuss the day's biggest stories with the Sunday Times chief foreign correspondent Christina Lamb and political commentator Benedict Spence. Plus, a look at the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers, including reports in the FT that Wall Street fears ever-rising oil prices as a result of the war. Good evening and welcome to Christina and Benedict. Now, the United States is sending 5,000 Marines and sailors to the Middle East. It's a significant scaling up of its deployment to the region, almost 2 weeks on from the start of the war with Iran. The unit are trained in crisis response, handling evacuations and protecting embassies. But they're also the first ones in the event of a ground war. As the US steps up its combat operations, today some of Iran's senior leadership took to the streets, joining protesters in Tehran in a show of defiance, just hours after Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth accused them of cowering and hiding underground. Our US correspondent David Blevins is in Washington with the latest.
This is a significant deployment. 2,500 sailors from an amphibious ready group. They come from 3 different ships, the Tripoli, the San Diego and the New Orleans, and are currently sailing towards the Middle East from the Philippines. And 2,500 Marines from a Marine Expeditionary Unit. Now, that's interesting. Members of those units often operate like an advance party of sorts. They are first on the ground, preparing for operations to follow. Now, the Pentagon doesn't want to go into detail around this for obvious security reasons, but we are being steered away from any suggestion that this is an escalation. Rather, the response to a request to give the President maximum options. And it sounds like one of those options now is boots on the ground. That is not a prospect Donald Trump's own supporters will want to consider, especially on a day when Central Command has confirmed the loss of all 6 crew members on that refueling jet that went down over western Iraq, bringing now to 13 the number of US personnel lost in the course of this conflict.
Well, speaking in the past few minutes from Joint Base Andrews, President Trump said the US will soon start escorting ships through the Strait of Hormuz.
To me, it means very simply that we are in a position of dominance that nobody's ever seen before. And whether or not they're able to say the words or whether or not they're able to even fight. Their Navy is gone, their Air Force is gone, most of their military is gone, their big threat is gone in every way. They have no radar. Weapons, for the most part, weapons, and for indefinitely, they have no way of determining what they call visibility. So just about everything is gone, and you'll see that. But today we've had some very, very big hits, very powerful hits.
Mr. President, when will the Navy start escorting tankers through the Straits of Hormuz?
It'll happen soon.
Well, as soon as the President got on the plane, he took to Truth Social, and we can bring you what he's posted. Moments ago, at my direction, the United States Central Command executed one of the most powerful bombing raids in the history of the Middle East and totally obliterated every military target in Iran's crown jewel, Karg Island. Our weapons are the most powerful and sophisticated that the world has ever known, but for reasons of decency, I have chosen not to wipe out the oil infrastructure on the island. However, should Iran or anyone else do anything to interfere with the free and safe passage of ships through the Strait of Hormuz, I will immediately reconsider this decision. During my first term and currently, I rebuilt our military into the most lethal, powerful and effective force by far anywhere in the world. Iran has no ability to defend anything that we want to attack. There is nothing they can do about it. Iran will never have a nuclear weapon, nor will it have the ability to threaten the United States of America, the Middle East, or for that matter, the world. Iran's military and all others involved with this terrorist regime would be wise to lay down their arms and save what's left of their country, which isn't much. Thank you for your attention to this matter, President Donald J. Trump. Well, I think we would describe that as completely bellicose language. He's definitely ramping it up there, isn't he?
Certainly if he has committed to an attack on Karg, and it is, as large as might be said, then that is a significant escalation. Karg is responsible for almost all of Iran's oil and gas exports. It's close to the Kuwaiti coastline. Without an operation, without any sort of operational ports in that area, then Iran is unable to export anything really of value to any of the few countries still wanting to do business with it, the chief of which would be China, which I suppose in many ways, potentially it ramps up pressure again on the international energy markets, but it also potentially severs Iran from one of its chief backers in this situation, because if China can't get any oil out of Iran, then what good is it for? They don't share any kind of ideological link. Yeah, that's a significant escalation. One can only assume, though, that the Iranian regime, if it has been put on this kind of death ground, so to speak, surely it's not expected that it's just going to sort of sit there. If the United States is doing this against Iran's oil infrastructure, the worry has to be an uptick in attacks on Gulf infrastructure as well. And the scenario that I was talking about earlier, potentially hitting more tanks that aren't trying to traverse the strait, that are just there, or other oil and gas terminals or pipelines, that surely therefore has to be on the table for the regime, because this makes it very clear the United States is here for regime change. It's not actually interested in simply a limited operation. It's trying to strong-arm them as much as they can.
Christina, do you think that these words are on Truth Social are empty threats?
He says he's done it, right? He says moments ago they executed one of the most powerful bombing raids in the history of the Middle East and totally obliterated every military target in Karg Island. So that seems a bit more than a threat. We don't know, because that's sort of the only report we have of this. But if they have done that, that is a pretty significant...
Although in that tweet he says, I've chosen not to wipe out the oil infrastructure on the island.
Yeah.
However, should Iran or anyone else do anything to interfere with the free and safe passage of ships through the Strait of Hormuz, I will immediately reconsider this decision. Therein is the threat.
What I'd say, though, is it becomes a little bit clearer potentially where the United States might be aiming its 5,000 troops. Actually, where else would they be going? Are they going to be going onto the mainland? No, there aren't enough of them, but Karg is certainly large enough for them to attempt an amphibious landing and to potentially take over if they've wiped out enough of the Iranian military that's already there, at which point, yes, it's out of their hands, it's offline, and that's their major financial lifeline gone.
So you think that is the strategy?
I don't... The funny thing is, 5,000, as Christina said earlier, 5,000 isn't enough to sort of affect regime change, but if you were to try and say, take this island, yes, actually, it's more likely that this would be a far more feasible thing. You don't want it to be too many, because you don't want them to be a sitting target. Yeah.
The island is smaller than Westminster, so 5,000 troops would be quite a lot. But, of course, there are other American troops in the region. 50,000 troops not very far away in different bases, so... there would be more, but that's still, even 55,000 is not enough for dealing with a country like Iran. And the fact is, I covered Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya. In all of those places, the overwhelming American military and air power meant that the regimes were toppled quite quickly. But then we had chaos. So, we're still having this discussion, are they going to be able to remove the regime or not? But even were they able to do that, then what happens?
I mean, it does seem from this post on Truth Social that the president is sort of giving himself an off-ramp in which he's saying that Iran's military and all others involved with this terrorist regime would be wise to lay down their arms and save what's left of their country.
I love the fact he always says thank you for your attention to this matter.
Always. But it's the difficulty, though, with the establishment in Iran, military or otherwise, is Some of them are practical people. Some of them are also religious fanatics. You know, you can't deal with religious fanatics like you can people who are motivated for other reasons, because one of the central parts of the revolutionary ideology is that it is a form of doomsday cult, and actually they quite like the idea of bringing on some sort of regional war, because actually they think that it's spiritually mandated. And so if you're dealing with those people, that's a bit of a problem. If you're dealing with somebody like the Ayatollah who thinks martyrdom is a good thing, you're not going to get those people to come to the table. And that has always been the major issue with everybody who said, well, why didn't they try and find a diplomatic solution? People have been trying to find a diplomatic solution to this for a very long time. The people in charge of Iran were not interested in that. If you can take out enough of those people and then hope that it's a more pragmatic cadre of people from the IRGC who end up in charge, well, maybe you can do that. But I've got to be honest right now, if what the United States... Let's be clear, they're taking out the military installations on Karg, that's so that it can't defend itself. I'm almost certain, therefore, that is a warning, if not a warning, an actual sort of preemptive move before taking the island, because then the US has control of this. That oil is then offline. The regime can't last without that. It hasn't really got anything else worth exporting. That's where its money comes in from. Almost all of that comes from China, and I don't see the Chinese then turning around and going, oh, yeah, don't worry, we'll back you on the off chance that you get it back again.
You mentioned diplomacy, but we mustn't forget that you know, the United States and Iran were in the midst of diplomacy when the US decided to strike.
Both this time and last June as well. And, of course, it was Trump that ended the JCPOA deal and said it was the worst deal in history that had previously been signed with the regime. So, yeah, I mean... we don't really know, but the Oman, which was kind of mediating in these negotiations, was saying, the foreign minister of Oman, that a lot of progress had been made. So, so they were rather askance at this happening. But in terms of what you were saying, Benedict, about the kind of people, the regime being hardline, and the people that they might have been able to deal with, I thought one of the most astonishing things that Trump said in the first week was when he said, we're taking people out so quickly, we're removing the people that we could deal with. And that seemed like a really astonishing thing to say.
I think we're just showing a picture, trying to zoom in on where Karg is. But as you say, a tiny island on which the population of 5,000 troops would be quite significant.
Well, certainly, you could defend a situation, you could take a position like that and defend it far more easily than you could using those to any other kind of effect, because that was what we were talking about at the top of the show, was actually, if you were going to take these 5,000, where could you possibly drop them? Would they be there to sort of disrupt drone production? That's dotted around the country. That would mean having to divide your forces. You're going to drop them into the middle of a major urban area? Not a great idea. This is a target that is a very valuable one, and it is of an appropriate size. And given that these would be, you know, amphibious movements in nature, I think the dominoes all slightly sort of fall into position there. Now, is it simply a threat? Is it like the build-up of troops in the first place, where lots of people were saying it's simply a positioning tactic to try to get them to step back? I don't know. I kind of feel as though we're slightly too far through the looking glass for it simply to be a threat. I think if you've taken the step of wiping out the military infrastructure on the island, why would you just leave it there?
Yeah. And this would be taking territory, which is something totally different to what they've done up to now.
But still, an objective, seemingly, of the president is to make sure that Iran never has a nuclear weapon. That's re-emerged as an objective.
Yeah, and the thing is, we can take what international experts and observers might say about the rate at which Iran is able to enrich uranium, where its sites might be, the effectiveness of further strikes, but it wouldn't really be a very good regime worth its salt, given the huge amount of security apparatus and secrecy around it, if we knew absolutely everything about everything that it was doing the whole time. Otherwise, the Israelis wouldn't have gone to such great lengths to try to have as many eyes all across the country as possible. And I keep on going back to when Donald Trump sort of said at the start of the war, oh, I think it could be over in 4 weeks. To me, that doesn't sound like a time frame in which you can pacify a country. To me, that sounds like the sort of time frame in which a country that has various different sites for enriching uranium might go, OK, we've got a very short window here to try and reach that threshold. And then your opponents come in and go, and we've got a certain period of time in which to find all of these facilities. That's sort of what it sounds like to me. Not to alarm anybody, but that's what that window sounds far more plausibly to be, rather than, oh, yeah, we're going to effect regime change in 4 weeks.
And certainly this post on Truth Social, definitely an escalation in the war tonight. And we know that tensions Well, hi, back here in Downing Street this afternoon as the Chancellor met petrol retailers to discuss ways to keep prices fair at the pumps amid the surging cost of oil. The meeting almost didn't happen after ministers were accused of using inflammatory language, leading to the abuse of workers on forecourts. The mood was more collegiate, though, once the discussions did get underway.
We wanted to speak to retailers because I do want us to work together to keep supply stable, to reassure the public and make sure that price rises are limited to what is absolutely necessary and no more. That's why we have frozen fuel duty for another year. It's why we've extended the 5p per litre cut through to September. And those are real and direct savings for motorists, and we want those to be felt.
Very good meeting, constructive. As I mentioned, we're anxious to work with the government. We talked about the Fuel Finder scheme and the implementation. We're nearly there. We're up to over 90% of all sites on it. We talked about, obviously, trying to do the best by the consumer in a time of uncertainty.
Did they apologise for the language that they used towards you earlier?
They didn't apologise, but I reiterated that we need to be careful what we say in the media. Obviously, anything that times of uncertainty does impact forecourt staff, and they're doing their best to serve the customers.
So strikes have continued against Hezbollah in the Lebanese capital, Beirut. The Lebanese army has posted on social media warning its citizens after Israeli aircraft dropped leaflets over the city. Our correspondent Cordelia Lynch can tell us more.
We're in western Beirut, where the Israeli military have been dropping thousands of these leaflets. Local people have described hearing the loud booms of Israeli jets as these dropped from the skies. On the front of it, it says, "In light of the success in Gaza, where is our country going?" And on the other side, it encourages people to rise up, disarm Hezbollah and resist Iranian influence. It's also got 2 QR codes for WhatsApp and Facebook, encouraging people to get in touch with Israeli intelligence. Now, many are seeing this as a couched threat because we know that Israel has previously said that if the government here, if the military, if the people don't stop Hezbollah, then it will take more action. And it all takes place amidst expanding military activity by the IDF. We've seen more blasts in central Beirut, in the south of the country, and a huge number of displaced people, up to 800,000 so far. And the fear is that situation will only get worse. Many are viewing these leaflets as part of a much broader threat from Israel.
OK, well, following while we were watching that, just some breaking news that we're hearing via the Reuters news agency, and that is that at least 12 medical personnel have been killed in an Israeli strike on a healthcare centre in southern Lebanon. So just to reiterate that breaking news, at least 12 medical personnel killed in an Israeli strike on a health centre in southern Lebanon. We were just hearing in our piece there the situation in Lebanon currently, weren't we?
We were, and it's just a desperate situation for that country that so often gets overlooked because of everything else that's going on in the region, but sort of compounded by the fact that, even though Hezbollah has been badly damaged by Israel as a result of the previous conflict, it's still being sucked in potentially to this regional conflict as well. The Lebanese armed forces are either unable or unwilling to disarm and pacify it. And so the people of that country are almost certainly going to suffer a massive uptick in Israeli activity as well, because Hezbollah does not look like it's going to back down either. But Israel, again, has massive military superiority over it. So we're going to see the same process that we saw last time, which is that the Israelis will be able to divert all sorts of forces to Lebanon, which they weren't able to last time because an awful lot were bound up in Gaza. They're going to be able to do that, and Hezbollah will try to endure for as long as it can to be the faithful sort of servant to Iran, but I cannot imagine that it's in any position to do even as much as it did during the Gaza war. I just don't see how this ends particularly well for them, and therefore, by extension, to the people of southern Lebanon.
Christina, your analysis of Hezbollah's role to play now?
People in Beirut and other parts of Lebanon very critical of Hezbollah for launching the operation in the first place, which gave the excuse for Israel to come in and create this really terrible situation where so many people have already been killed and and displaced. It's really grim.
We are going to take a break now. I'm going to move on to domestic stories. A new picture is unearthed showing Jeffrey Epstein, Andrew Mountbatten, Windsor and Lord Mandelson together, seen for the very first time today. Stay with us for more.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
They call him the king of the jungle.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Yusra Al-Baghir has this report, and this is what's left of it.
As a woman of colour, how did the Harris campaign speak to you?
People risk their lives to speak to us for this report.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is.
First off, just the scale of what we're looking at.
Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to.
Being a Sky News presenter.
Hello and welcome. Westminster, the heart of British politics.
I'm so sorry about what happened to you. So what on earth is going on?
It's not true.
Can I tell you what I think? It's really unusual.
Mornings with Roger and Frost. Let's crack on. Let's get started.
You are watching The Wrap. The Prime Minister's standards watchdog has rejected calls for an investigation into Sir Keir Starmer and his handling of the appointment of Peter Mandelson as ambassador to the United States. The Conservatives had accused the PM of making misleading statements in the Commons and said number 10 was withholding documents that should have been released, a claim the party has repeated tonight. More on that in a moment. But first, here's Laura Bundock taking us through what we've learned over the latest revelation in the Epstein files.
The first known picture of Andrew Mountbatten, Windsor, Jeffrey Epstein and Peter Mandelson has emerged. 3 powerful men sat together in a relaxed setting. It is another interesting and intriguing revelation from the Epstein files. So what more have we learned from this photo? In the picture, taken outside, you can see the three men sat around a table with star-spangled mugs in front of them. Both Andrew and Peter Mandelson are barefoot, wearing white robes, and there's an empty space at the table. Sky News has not verified the location, although the architecture of the property strongly resembles homes in Martha's Vineyard, a well-known Massachusetts summer hangout for the wealthy. We don't know when the photo was taken, what the occasion was, or indeed who took it. And this photo is not evidence of any wrongdoing. Sky News understands it was taken in the same location as an image that previously surfaced in Epstein's so-called birthday book. In that photo, Lord Mandelson is again shown in a white bathrobe with Epstein. Above the photo was a message in which he describes Epstein as his best pal. Both Andrew and Lord Mandelson, the UK's former ambassador to the US, strongly deny any wrongdoing relating to their relationship with Jeffrey Epstein.
So more revelations as expected, and now photographs that have never been seen before on the front pages of the newspapers.
Yeah, and that's just going to be the unbelievably damaging thing. I mean, so much of this story could go over many people's heads, and this would be all that they would need to see. The public, I think, has a pretty firm view of how they feel about Jeffrey Epstein. A lot of them have a pretty firm view about how they feel about Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, and a lot of them feel similarly about Peter Mandelson. The Prime Minister's judgment is called into question every time this scandal rears its head all over again. And it doesn't really matter if it's a question of poor ethics or impropriety. Actually, it's simply about judgment. In many ways, the most innocent explanation, which was, oh, he lied to me and I bought it, is the worst one, given that he was, somebody who was feted and prided on his forensic background as this top lawyer, somebody for whom detail was the most important thing, to have given the top diplomatic position he could possibly have made, not to a career civil servant, but to this person, and to have, sort of had the information that was given to him about the potential, risk, damage on his reputation and his judgment, and to have gone ahead with it anyway. That's all people really care about. They look at the Prime Minister as being somebody who either gambled and lost spectacularly or was just really dim. And frankly, I don't think people think either of those things are a good thing for a Prime Minister.
Christina, do you think that the Prime Minister can recover from this, or is this going to rumble on and on and on?
Well, I mean, this photo just emerged today. It does make you wonder what other photographs may yet come, because there are millions of these papers to go through. So, and this photograph, I don't know, you used the word CD. It's something that, about it. We don't know what they're doing, and maybe it's totally they weren't doing anything, but they're just something. Seeing them in the bathrobes and knowing what had gone on. Just really makes you, and it is the first picture we've seen of the three of them together like that. So I think it is quite a sort of memorable picture. And I mean, the thing that what I just always come back to on Epstein is, first of all, why all these people were sort of thought it was okay to take his. Well, hospitality is not quite the right word in this case, but to, be involved with this man and not think there was anything wrong with it. But also the fact that at the heart of this is the victims, the women and girls, and that is tending to get a bit forgotten in all this discussion of the political ramifications. And that really concerns me, and nobody has been brought to justice for this.
Yeah, but just say Peter Mandelson has always denied any wrongdoing, and the same with Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, and Mandelson has actually apologised to the victims, hasn't he?
He has, but again, it's one of those where you just sort of think it's all very well and good to have done that after the fact, but actually if what the Prime Minister is saying, that you misled him, well then that apology rings very hollow, because it does just sound like one of those apologies that comes up because you found yourself into a bit of a sticky situation. But, you know, again, what are the justifications for him being in this position? You know, one of the things we always heard about Mandelson was this fantastic, brilliant political operator who was able to sort of operate in those grey zones where perhaps things are, as you use the word, a bit seedy, a bit sort of, you know, below the books, so to speak. Things had to be done in ways that people wouldn't have thought was particularly upstanding. Well, if that's the justification for putting this man in this position, you can't then really turn around as the guy that gave him the position and say, well, I had no idea that this sort of thing might go on, because you put him in there to be the fixer, because it's very difficult to do. So again, to then turn around and go, oh, well, he lied to me. Of course he was going to lie to you in that situation. That's the whole reason why you picked him. None of this looks good. It's a slow-acting poison, and the fact of the matter is that we're only just sort of at the start. We don't know what else is going to come. As Christina says, we don't know what other photographs or bits of information there may be. It's going to keep on coming. Every time something happens, it's on the front page, and people are reminded, ah, yes, the Prime Minister made that man our ambassador to the United States.
I mean, I suppose he has to use the excuse that he lied to me, because he can't say, I took a gamble, knowing who he was, and it didn't pay off.
Yeah,
but again, nobody would accept that either.
You're the former Director of Public Prosecutions, buddy. People lie to you. You ought to be able to spot those at this stage in your life.
Well, Peter Mandelson on the front page, as we say on many of the papers. Let's take a look at what else is around. Well, on the front of the Eye, the US and Israel intensify strikes on Iran in the hope of a breakthrough as the conflict in the Middle East enters its third week. The Telegraph leads with the US President deploying a Marine unit to the Middle East that could put boots on the ground to help secure the Strait of Hormuz. The Guardian reports that Europe is pushing back against Trump's decision to ease some US sanctions on Russian oil as prices surge due to the war. The Express headline reads, "Get drilling to stop soaring bills," as the Prime Minister is urged to open the North Sea oil field to stop energy bills going up. The Times carries a promise from the Chancellor to help households with rising energy bills during the conflict. The FT leads on a warning from Wall Street that oil prices will be driven up sharply if the war continues for months to come. The Mirror carries this new photograph, as we were discussing, of Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, Peter Mandelson and Jeffrey Epstein, with the headline, "Andy, Mandy and the Paedophile." The Star leads with the same image of the three men sitting around a table in bathrobes. Starmer's dereliction of duty is the headline in the Mail, after Number 10 admitted the Prime Minister did not speak to Lord Mandelson before he was appointed US ambassador. So let's start with the front page of the Financial Times, shall we? And that's the fears from Wall Street over the ever-rising oil price. We've got RBC Capital Markets saying that it's expected oil prices to exceed $128. That's the high that it hit after the weeks after Russia's full invasion of Ukraine. And they're saying that potentially it could top the 2008 record high of $147.
Yeah, I mean, simply nobody is sure where it could end up going, because nobody's actually sure how hard people are prepared to push. You know, does Iran actually go for the not quite nuclear option because they don't have it yet, but the next best thing, which is to go all out against their neighbour's oil infrastructure, in which case, absolutely, you could see it top that price. We're talking about up to a third of the world's oil and gas.
Well, Iran was threatening over $200 a barrel.
Whether or not it can get to $200...
They're saying, if you want us to bring it up to that price,
this is going to be the key thing, then, is how other countries react to that. Of course, the United States and China themselves are actually major oil and gas producers themselves. It's not in their interests for these prices to go up too high, and we'll see what kind of reserves they have. Also, you know, how much of Venezuela's oil can be got online at a sort of an increased rate now that there is a more favourable regime, you know, not a friendly regime, but it's certainly been put on notice by the US. So there are ways, obviously, to make sure it doesn't stay high perpetually, but it's that spike, it's those fluctuations that people worry about, because then it has the knock-on effect into all other areas of the global economy, and it's the open-endedness of this. Nobody knows when it's likely to end, and for all Donald Trump, I'm sure, is trying to soothe people by going, it's fantastic, and we're on schedule, we're ahead of schedule. Nobody knows what that schedule is. And
it's that spike that's benefiting Russia, isn't it, Christina? We look at the front page of The Guardian, and we see that Europe is actually, they're at odds because they're against Donald Trump dropping sanctions against Russia.
Yeah, I mean, 2 weeks ago, the price was only $63, so it's already, now they're talking about being 128. That's massive. And one of the people quoted in the FT is talking about the oil apocalypse. So this is, you know, affecting everybody. It's all of us are affected by this, but positively
for Russia with having the oil ban lifted on them.
Having just come back from Ukraine about a week or so ago, you know, it's devastating for them. In fact, you know, on one hand, you've got Zelensky offering help. He's already sent people to Gulf states to help with intercepting the drones because Ukraine now has been forced into a situation where they kind of lead the world in how to do that, because every night they have hundreds of drones, actually mostly Iranian drones, being lobbed at them. So on one hand, he's trying to help, but then, you know, he's sort of being hit by the fact that Russia now, the US has eased sanctions, at least for the next month, and allowing Russia to sell their oil, or the oil that they have already at sea. So, and this has two effects, because it's not only that they can sell that oil, but the oil that they were already selling to other countries like India and China were paying a sort of discounted amount for it because they had nowhere else they could sell it. But now they can put the price up. So they're talking about making 150 million, 200 million a day now through this, which is money that will be used to hit Ukraine. So, you know, the implications from this attack on Iran are just absolutely enormous.
Yes, indeed, not good news for Ukraine by any stretch of the imagination. Just because we are running out of time, Bennett, I wonder if you could take us to the Daily Telegraph. Congress could scupper Chagos deal.
Yeah, so this is a new proposal that's been put forward that would give Congress the power, well, it would give the Senate the power to approve or veto changes to the treaty that's in place between the United States and Britain on the operation of the base on Diego Garcia. And I mean, this entire fiasco has, I think, really been brought home to bear by the onset of this war. The fact of the matter is that one of the few things that Britain still has as a sort of a demonstration of hard power around the world, at the exact moment that aircraft carriers are becoming very vulnerable to drones, but islands in very remote parts of the world are great for high-level, long-range bombers to have, and the United Kingdom is, at this moment in time, still, for some unknown reason, in the process of trying to give this thing away, even as the United States is sort of trying to put the screws on them and say, no, this doesn't work for us at all. If you've got a situation where the US is trying to use its own political power, its own lawmakers, to say, we won't let you do that, that is a real slap in the face for the authority of the United Kingdom, because actually, where does the Prime Minister turn in that situation? It's not just the President that's saying it, it's elected representatives in the United States that have that power over him as well. That's embarrassing.
OK, Benedict and Christina, thank you very much for the moment. Coming up, we'll have much more from tomorrow's newspapers. Do stay with us for that.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist. A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan had the right to respond.
You're like, what?
A historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
Hello again, more now on the papers with Benedict and Christina. Let's take a look at the Daily Mirror front page, and they have that picture revealed for the first time today, never seen before, of Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, Peter Mandelson. I was going to say Lord Mandelson. He technically is still Lord Mandelson, but we'll call him Peter Mandelson, and Jeffrey Epstein pictured in a relaxed mode, shall we say, around a table. Andy, Mandy and the paedophile is the headline.
Yeah, and there's no real context to what's going on here. We don't know the backstory. And it doesn't matter, because there it is in full colour for everybody to see. The links between the three, obviously, as you say, in sort of a very laid-back situation, certainly not a business setting or anything like that. And it's just another continuation of this story that is going to end up being one of the slow-burning poisons that does for the Prime Minister. There's no getting away from this, because I don't see any good outcome for it, is the thing. There's no sort of happy solution that makes the problem go away or improves the Prime Minister's reputation. It's just one of those continuing humiliations he's going to have to keep on facing as and when something like this crops up and the press go, wonderful, we've got something else that's related to the story that we can run with. We don't have a timeline. This isn't Donald Trump saying that the timeline is whatever I say it is. This is the opposite. This is quite literally as long as it can possibly be. All we just are waiting for, I think, is the sort of critical moment where enough of the backbenchers in the Labour Party decide, actually, this is too damaging for us. Have we reached that stage? Possibly not. We've still got the local elections to come, but this is really damning. It's just another example of how damaging
it is. It's an astonishing.
It's never going to improve.
No, and it is an astonishing photograph, because you immediately, the way they're dressed in the dressing gowns, and it just makes you wonder what has been going on. So,
the subheadline there, Epstein Files bombshell. You do get the sense that there are very many more to come. I mean, we know that the files range to the size of the Eiffel Tower. That's the amount that's still to be gone through.
A huge amount. And again, it's partly what makes this story so surprising, that the Prime Minister was either so foolish as to allow this appointment to be made, or took the gamble that this was something worth doing. The story was coming down the tracks like a very, very determined juggernaut. And, because Donald Trump had been talking about it on the campaign trail, so many people in the United States were determined that this had been going on and that it would be up front and centre of the agenda. Now, whatever's happened subsequently in the United States, so far it is, if you like, British politicians and figures that are catching strays. That's not to say that it's not going to therefore get worse in the United States. There are going to be implications for people there, almost certainly at some point. We don't know who. But these people are collateral damage for them, so, who's to say what else might come out? I mean, there have, of course, been suggestions that maybe Mandelson or the former Prince Andrew should go over to testify. I can't see them doing that, but those calls also aren't going to go away the more information is revealed.
The Mail bringing it back to Sir Keir Starmer, Christina, their headline, Starmer's dereliction of duty, and we know the Conservatives, Kemi Badenoch accused him of perpetual lying, misleading Parliament, and also their suggestion, which they repeated tonight, that Number 10 are withholding documents.
Yeah, I mean, it just goes back to this whole thing that, here was someone who was the Director of Public Prosecutions, and you would have expected to ask these questions. So that, I think, is what's making it so inexplicable and difficult for them to really get out of.
But the Ethics Committee deciding today that there is no investigation to be carried out into Starmer's...
That may be the case, but actually that sort of thing will therefore simply be lost in the fog. People will just go, OK, that doesn't matter, then we'll move on. But they'll move on to the next part of the story, which is ultimately then about judgment rather than ethics. And Christina's right. You know, this was the man who promised, after years of real catastrophe after the Conservatives, listen, I'm forensic, I'm professional, I may be quite dull, but at the very least, I'm not going to be letting these sort of, mishaps go past. Oh, whoops, now I haven't. Oh, on top of that, I'm losing cabinet ministers because of, I've lost my my corruption czar to a corruption scandal, my housing minister to a housing scandal. And it's just another one of those where you just sit back and go, what actually has this man brought that is improving the standard, the oversight in public life? Because right now, it almost seems to be happening at a faster rate than it did under the Conservatives, and that's pretty impressive.
And to bring this back to Iran, I think a lot of people do not understand the government strategy with Iran, the fact that at the beginning they didn't give access to the United States to use Diego Garcia in our bases, and that then...
were they bullied into that, would you say?
I mean, and you could argue, OK, well, that's maybe a principled stand not to have given them. And a lot of people in this country are very unhappy about this war in Iran and would have supported that. But he didn't actually then come out and make that principled stand. He refused the access, but then gave the access but for defensive operation, which none of us really know what exactly that means. So it sort of became the worst of both worlds. And you could have done, as the Spanish Prime Minister has done, and said, right, we don't agree with this, we're not using our bases, and this is not a legal war.
I mean, it's true. If nothing else, they've been incredibly bad at messaging, and this is something that's actually come from within the party itself. Sort of the briefing to the press is the things that they do well and the things that they might be able to make any kind of hay on, they're tremendously bad at broadcasting to people. And, at the very least, the government ought to be able to be good at optics and comms. Once upon a time, Peter Mandelson was part of a machine that was fantastic at that at New Labour. Absolutely none of that is on display in this administration.
Yes, they have been very criticised for not having...
Generally, on the international stage,
we must leave it there. We have run out of time. Thank you both for taking us through the papers. Good to see you, as usual. Coming up for you, what happened when Hollywood stars Rob Mack and Ryan Reynolds were handed the microphone to commentate on Sky Sports.
OK, there's a lot of firing going on.
Can you explain to me why? We're journalists, sir.
Let's go. Watch, wait, right, we're going to get in. Right, get in.
We just want to ask you a few questions about your involvement with ISIS. The next step for them quite often is getting on a boat and sailing illegally over into Europe.
Es un solo procesamiento, una sola sacada.
Whoa. Oh my goodness. Whoa. Oh my goodness.
If you weren't affected, you'd be a bit of a strange person.
Turn off the camera. Turn around and go away. Okay, but listen, I told you 3 times.
They saw 2 guys, 2 bad people.
There's an absolutely packed dinghy.
But that is what it's like. Sometimes you have to put in an awful lot of hard work. It's worth doing. I suppose it is what we do.
I'll tell you on another day on the podcast what that was all about.
Welcome to the world.
Come along for the journey. It'll be fun.
Russia knows our weaknesses, but do you? This is the war game.
There were a number of armed security.
We want to discover, to find out what's really going on.
Everything you need to know about British politics in about 20 minutes.
I actually don't like political drama.
So, where next?
Available wherever you get your podcasts.
I'll always remember going into Gaza City during the war, and all around us was destruction and the sound of battle. I'm Adam Parsons, Sky's Middle East correspondent.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up.
Big Sky News journalist.
Ed Conway. Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is.
First off, just the scale of what we're looking at.
Our data shows it's been happening. Question is why it hasn't been stopped.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
They call him the king of the jungle.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Yusra al-Baghir has this report. And this is what's left of it.
As a woman of colour, how did the Harris campaign speak to you?
People risk their lives to speak to us for this report.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is.
First off, just the scale of what we're looking at.
Our data shows it's been happening. Question is why it hasn't been stopped.
Time now to catch up on all of the very latest sports news with Teddy.
Adding a continental touch to Arsenal's never say die style is what Wenger is promising.
Quand je suis venu, je veux dire, il y a tout ce qu'il faut pour être un grand club. Je veux dire, ils ont un public qui est fabuleux. Je veux dire, il y a des terrains où on peut s'entraîner. Il y a un entourage qui est très bien. Je veux dire, ils ont des très bonnes structures.
I think it was a big chance for Arsenal to take this player because I believe he has a great future.
He knew he had to get those kind of players that will know his philosophy and will help him implement that philosophy on the pitch at Arsenal. If you want to change the mentality at Arsenal, you don't go and sign English players.
It didn't have as big an effect as when we signed Dennis Bergkamp. That was like a massive statement. When Patrick signed, these are players that nobody's really heard of.
I was happy to have a chance to sign him. And overall, Patrick Vieira landed at Arsenal, but nobody knew that I was the manager. So at the start, he didn't play.
So actually Remy Gard came in at the same time. Remy was an accomplished player, but also I think to give Patrick comfort that he wasn't alone, he wasn't the only French guy in the dressing room. So, and I think that worked well. Remy was a little bit more of a mature player than Patrick.
Remy was great for Patrick because Remy spoke English, Remy was so smart, loved everything about London, would go to museums, go and take Patrick along with him. And Patrick was so young, all of this was new to him.
They were not speaking well English at the start and they had to adapt. Lingard is a very intelligent person. Patrick Vieira will know better than I do, but it was certainly important to him.
I arrived at Arsenal before Arsene, so it was quite really challenging to understand the language and to really understand the culture. It was really good that Remy Gard was with me at the time because he was a really, really big help for me. It was challenging at the beginning.
He couldn't speak English and it was up to me and my best A-level French to make sure he settled down. After a couple of weeks, I went down to the dressing room. I said, Patrick, est-ce que tu peux dire quelque chose en anglais? Can you speak something in English? He said, oui, Monsieur Dean. Yes, Mr. Dean. I said, qu'est-ce que tu peux dire? What can you say? He looked at me and he said, Tottenham are magnifique, Patrick, fantastic, Patrick. I said, qui te dit ça? Who told you that? He said, Ray Parler. So Ray was giving him English lessons.
Ray Parler is the last who could help for the language barrier.
If Ray's got into Patrick's head to try and teach him English, he was set up by us lot, you know, because we were like, yeah, go on, Ray, tell him some stuff. I remember him talking about beans on toast, and Patrick's like, what do you mean? Beans on toast? You've hit the beans on toast. And like, the post.
I have to be honest, the English players make it really easy for me as well. They've been helping me to find a way to
Let's take a look at the weather.
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean All Clear Skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News weather.
Well, the chilly weather will stay with us for the next few days, but conditions look like becoming more settled in the middle of the week, with temperatures trending upwards. Overnight rain will clear East Anglia and the southeast early in the day. For much of the country, it'll be a chilly start with a fairly widespread frost and the risk of some ice in the north.
All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News weather.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist.
A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan had the right to respond.
You're like, what?
Historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
They call him the king of the jungle.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Yusra al-Baghir has this report, and this is what's left of it.
As a woman of colour, how did the Harris campaign speak to you?
People risk their lives to speak to us for this report.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
We're trying to see as much as we can.